the place and the people came over Charity. The sight of the weak-minded old woman, of the cowed children, and the ragged man sleeping off his liquor, made the setting of her own life seem a vision of peace and plenty. She thought of the kitchen at Mr. Royal's, with its scrubbed floor and dresser full of china, and the peculiar smell of yeast and coffee and soft soap that she had always hated, but that now seemed the very symbol of household order. She saw Mr. Royal's room with the high-backed horsehair chair, the faded rag carpet, the row of books on a shelf, the engraving of "The Surrender of Burgoyne" over the stove, and the mat with a brown and white spaniel on a moss-green border. And then her mind travelled to Miss Hatchard's house, where all was freshness, purity, and fragrance, and compared to which the Red House had always seemed so poor and plain. "This is where I belong. This is where I belong," she kept repeating to herself, but the words had no meaning for her. Every instinct and habit made her a stranger among these poor swamp people, living like vermin in their lair. With all her soul she wished she had not yielded to Harney's curiosity and brought him there. The rain had drenched her, and she began to shiver under the thin fold of her dress. The younger woman must have noticed it, for she went out of the room and came back with a broken teacup, which she offered to Charity. It was half full of whisky, and Charity shook her head, but Harney took the cup and put his lips to it. When he had set it down, Charity saw him feel in his pocket and drag out $1. He hesitated a moment, and then put it back, and she guessed that he did not wish her to see him offering money to people she had spoken of as being her kin. The sleeping man stirred, lifted his head, and opened his eyes. They rested vacantly for a moment on Charity and Harney, and then closed again, and his head drooped. But a look of anxiety came into the woman's face. She glanced out of the window, and then came up to Harney. "I guess you better go along now," she said. The young man understood and got to his feet. "Thank you," he said, holding out his hand. She seemed not to notice the gesture, and turned away as they opened the door. The rain was still coming down, but they hardly noticed it. The pure air was like balm in their faces. The clouds were rising and breaking, and between their edges the light streamed down from remote blue hollows. Harney untied the horse, and they drove off through the diminishing rain, which was already beaded with sunlight. For a while Charity was silent, and her companion did not speak. She looked timidly at his profile. It was graver than usual, as though he too were oppressed by what they had seen. Then she broke out abruptly, "Those people back there are the kind of folks I come from. They may be my relations for all I know." She did not want him to think that she regretted having told him her story. "Poor creatures," he rejoined. "I wonder why they came down to that fever-hole." She laughed ironically. "To better themselves. It's worse up on the mountain. Bash Hyatt married the daughter of the farmer that used to own the brown house. That was him by the stove, I suppose." Harney seemed to find nothing to say, and she went on. "I saw you take out $1 to give to that poor woman. Why did you put it back?" He reddened, and leaned forward to flick a swamp fly from the horse's neck. "I wasn't sure." "Was it because you knew they were my folks, and thought I'd be ashamed to see you giving them money?" He turned to her with eyes full of reproach. "Oh, Charity!" It was the first time he had ever called her by her name. Her misery welled over. I ain't ashamed. They're my people, and I ain't ashamed of them," she sobbed. "My dear," he murmured, putting his arm about her, and she leaned against him and wept out her pain. It was too late to go around to Hamlin, and all the stars were out in a clear sky when they reached the North Dormer Valley and drove up to the Red House. End of chapter 6.